Good morning, St. Lucia. Wake up, everybody. I'm so happy that you tuned into this morning. And of course, it's all about reading here, and we have some amazing authors right here in St. Lucia. And I think we don't know enough about them, and I'm happy to be able to meet Najla Bailey. And I want to say a special good morning to you. How are you today?
I'm quite well, thank you.
Perfect. Well, thank you for being here with us. And today, St. Lucia, we're going to get inside the mind of Najla and really know what she's doing down here and her writing. So, Najla, how did it all begin for you? Who exactly is Najla Bailey?
Well, I'm Najla Carrasco Bailey, and I'm an author. I'm an educator of long standing, and I'm a trainer as well. Um, my first book, I think, was published before you were born in 1988. I'm right, aren't I? Well, just about, probably. And it was called Time for Poetry. And it was a textbook used in the schools for many years. And I say the schools, I mean the schools of the archipelago and across in Belize. It was very popular CXC text, which actually continues up today in Trinidad. It's still used, I'm happy to say. St. Lucia, of course, has since discarded it, as they do all good things. Um, but yes, and about 4 years ago, I published my second book, Telling Tales from St. Lucia. And it's an anthology of 10 stories, but you really get 13 because in one story, which features a Tim Tim, St. Lucia's first Tim Tim storytelling competition, there are three stories. The finalists each give a story. So within that story, there are three stories. So you're really getting 13 stories. Of course, they're all set in St. Lucia, and they highlight the culture of St. Lucia in various forms.
Well, that leads me to the next question, which I think that probably is the answer, because where do you get your inspiration from when it comes to your writing then? So everything really comes from your island living here?
Absolutely. You see, I love interfacing with the children of that age group, junior to middle age, and from common entrance age to about middle school age. And I've had occasion to speak to them and then found out that they knew nothing about the local culture. They never saw themselves on the pages of literature. And I decided I want to do something about that. So I built those stories especially for the children of St. Lucia.
Now, with that too, I think it's really important for us, not only as Caribbean people, but for sure as St. Lucians, to have something to identify to, because you find too often now, especially with technology, a lot of the youth don't like to read or just find that it's not interesting enough or intriguing. And it could just be because, again, it's not that relatable. So, what are your views or what are your hopes even for the advancement of literacy and, of course, fostering a love of reading here for, the generations coming up?
Because we know that there is a huge problem when it comes to literacy and interest in reading. Girls and especially boys. And how do we expect them to be interested in reading when we feed them on a diet of sort of places of far away? We don't start them off like that. We need to start them with, just as you said, literature that they can identify with. But instead we give them books about Ahmed in Bangladesh and so on. And all right, they can do that a little later on. But where we know there is a problem, and where there are no books in the home and so on, let's give them something with which they're familiar, and let them be encouraged and validated by seeing themselves. And so yesterday we were, for instance, one of the stories, my stories features L'Orangette. That is the young leaf of the sour orange tree. And L'Orangette played a big part in that story because it was able to put Kobo, the thief, who went into the house of these two young siblings, to put him to sleep so that they were able to tie him up. They asked their aunt to make a strong cup of L'Orangette tea, and he drank it, and he was theirs after that. And so they tied him up with their father's fishing line, and then they called the police, and Kobo was finally taken. So I had the children, squeezing they hadn't heard of l'orangette. They didn't know. So it has such a lovely smell. And we had the children, and they were so excited to learn about l'orangette and its properties.
So, what I would like now, Najla, if anybody, of course, would like to contact you because you have two really good books with great cultural content, again, which is really great material for kids that they would like. How can, if people want to reach you, directly so that they can get their copies, whether for themselves or their family, how can they contact you?
And I'd say 486-8299 is my cell phone number. But of course, I think the book salon still has copies. Oh yes, the Folk Research Center has copies also. Book Salon, Folk Research Center.
And I'm happy to get this out. When you get something good, you don't want to keep it to yourself. So I'm happy, St. Lucia, to be sharing that with you. So now you know how you can contact her and some of the other stores or outlets that have this material, authentic St. Lucian material. So go out, experience it. And if you think kids don't enjoy our culture, if you think the children are not into our culture, just enjoy this last closing off with Najla interacting with the kids.
I'd like to present you with a copy of the book.
Thank you so
So
much.
I hope you're going to read it.
Most definitely. And I have a son, so I'll be happy to expose him to that. He is 7 years old.
Very good.
So I'm also going to be hands-on with this with my son. So St. Lucia, enjoy this short clip of the kids enjoying our culture with Najla. Hey St. Lucia, it's time to wake up. Good morning again, everybody, and thanks for joining us. If you just tuned in, you're watching This Morning. Of course, I'm your host, Chayla Mendes, and today helping me help you all wake up the right way, I have a good friend here with us. Her name is Leanne Martin, but ever since she's touched down on Ireland, we've baptized her, so she is Leanne St. Martin as long as she's in St. Lucia. Leanne, good morning. Thanks for being here. Now, listen, she is a chef. She's also a culinary blogger, and she is adventuring and experiencing exactly what we have here to offer in St. Lucia. So we're going to get to know a lot more about her. And Leanne, I know you've been really adventuring and, out on the farms, part of cooking competitions. How's the experience been being in St. Lucia?
The experience of finding St. Lucia has been really good, familiar, somewhat nostalgic. I grew up in Trinidad, born and raised.
Island girl.
21 years in Trinidad. So on Monday, we went out to farm visits, and it was pretty dark, and we were looking for watermelons, and jumping through the ground and the grass, it just reminded me of growing up in Trinidad. I wanted to take a more simpler, more local route this year in traveling. I wanted to, do stuff that locals do, because that's who I am. I would have loved to see in a more furnished hotel, but I really wanted to get that local feel for this trip. Yeah.
Great. Well, you see, so we were all giving her the Lucian experience here. And, so tell us, like I said, I introduced you as a blogger and chef. So tell us how it all began for you, especially, becoming a chef.
Well, I've always loved cooking. I started cooking at 12 years, though my mother argues that I started cooking at 10. And in finishing culinary school, I did my externship and I worked at a restaurant in New York. That's where I live, for a while. And then, to be honest, after coming out of culinary school, I didn't know what angle, I didn't know which direction I really wanted to go. And I've always had a job in finance, a career in finance. So 2 years ago, the culinary world is one that you can be somewhat creative, and with the blogging and me cooking and me being able to cook for myself, I said, why not start a blog that would be a junction? And it would be a junction because it would be my Trinidad upbringing meets New York living meets cooking for yourself 2 or 3 portions. So I call it Gasparillo Junction. Gasparillo is the village in Trinidad that I grew up. And people love I love the concept. I live the concept. I cook for myself 2 or 3 portions. A lot of people have been receptive to it because a lot of my friends would say, I like to cook, but I don't know how to cook for myself. I don't know how to portion it for myself. So with my tips and my tricks and my measurements, everyone loves it.
It's true. Now, you know what? Because I was about to ask, how did you get into blogging? So that's pretty interesting because even for me, you know, sometimes you cook and then you just cook so much.
You
Or even
cook
when you
so
think you
much.
put a little bit, it's still like, you know, just too much for, it's just me and my son at home. So
Right.
it's crazy.
Right. And then I cook with a lot of, I like to incorporate, if not local Caribbean vegetables and herbs, I like to incorporate local that I get in the green markets in New York. And one of the reasons why I came to St. Lucia was to highlight and show what the foods that I grew up eating and the farm to table and how we've always ever eaten farm to table.
True.
So yeah, that's a reason why I came to St. Lucia.
Now, you know, that's one thing I think us here in St. Lucia and even in the Caribbean, we may take for granted until we leave outside of the islands. And then you realize, you know, oh my gosh, you know, the food that we get, even just the market experience prior to having experience in the tourism industry, I never had the appreciation that I have for our local market now, and would always wonder why visitors and tourists, people would come and, you know, like the market is a to-do on their list. I'm like, why would they want to go? But, you
Right.
know, it's an experience besides the dialogue and the exchange and the people. But then, of course, the produce and, you know, everything that you get, it's...
And now, so as I said, this trip could not have been possible without my friends at the St. Lucia Hotel and Tourism Association and their virtual agriculture clearinghouse. They're really trying to bridge the gap between the local farmers and the hotels and restaurants so they can feature more locally grown fruits and vegetables on their menus. So that's really good because one of the things we as foreigners and tourists look for is that local, sweet, juicy
true.
fruit. Yeah.
That's true. And you know, everybody's into going organic, and I'm like, this is the time for us here in the Caribbean to really get our act together
Yeah.
with farming, because this is where we have an advantage too,
Yes,
you know?
yes.
So that's great. And just to, you know, sum it up, because you are living your passions, but still you're supporting it with your 9 to 5. And I think this is an interesting topic because people think to go after their passions, like sometimes you have to just drop everything and go, but
Right.
sometimes you actually need something to help support you whilst you're on that journey.
Yes.
So
For me, it's a little different. I actually like, I have my career is in accounting. I actually like the accounting aspect of my life.
not my friend, but
I actually like the accounting aspect of my life. Sooner or later, I am going to have to make a decision and go full time into culinary. But for now, juggling both, it's good. It fuels my passion and the organization, the project management skills that I've learned in my 9 to 5 just transfers over to my blog and cooking. So it's a win-win for me so far.
perfect. Well, St. Lucia, you know, one thing I gathered, now I know who to hit up when I want accounting help. That was like my least favorite subject at school. The only subject I actually ever had a mental block for ever. But anyways, so you see, some people have it, some people don't. It's just about doing what you love. And you know what, Leanne, it was so great having you here.
Thank you
but
so
we
much.
Can't close off until, again, just share with St. Lucia your blog so that more people can follow, of course, and St. Lucia can send that love.
So my blog's name is GasparilloJunction.com. I'm on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook with that same handle, and I would appreciate the local love from you guys. Thank you so much for having me.
Perfect. And thanks again for being here with us. Listen, she's so delightful. And again, another island girl. So we need to support each other, people. Check out the blog. And of course, keep watching This Morning.